The roar inside Madison Square Garden was like nothing I'd ever heard before. Thousands of voices echoing, a brass band blaring, and camera flashes strobing off the rafters. I stood just off stage, adjusting the collar of my dress uniform for what must have been the 20th time. My hands were steady, but my heart was racing. 4 grueling years at West Point, through deployments, drills, impossible winter mornings, and impossible expectations. And now, this was the moment, graduation. I'd grown up in a town no one outside of North Carolina could find on a map, where reputation was everything, and my dad, Harry Morgan, guarded our family's name like a vault. He was the kind of man who shook your hand with a grip just a little too tight and always believed the loudest voice in the room belonged to him. My older brother, Dylan, was his golden child. If I was the reliable one, the overachiever, Dylan was the one who got noticed, fiery, reckless, and always somehow forgiven. Mom, Mary, drifted between us, soft-voiced and anxious, smoothing the friction with silence. From the moment I was little, it was obvious the rules were different for Dylan. He could come home late, skip class, or lose his temper, and Dad would just shrug it off. I, on the other hand, was expected to make the family proud, stay quiet, and do my best not to embarrass anyone. Maybe that's why I joined the army. Maybe that's why I'd worked so hard at the academy, just to prove, if not to them, then at least to myself, that I was worth something. I exhaled slowly as the line of graduates inched forward. My roommate and closest friend, Alyssa, gave me a thumbs up from the row behind me. The band played "I America the Beautiful" a little off-key, and I could smell popcorn from the concession stand drifting in with the humid May air. When the dean called my name, a cadet Caitlin Morgan, United States Army, a wall of noise hit me. For a moment, everything else faded, the band, the crowd, even my nerves. I stepped onto the stage, back straight, heart pounding, mouth stretched in the smile you put on for the world even if it feels a little fake. That's when I saw them, my family, 10 rows back, just right of center. Mom looked small, twisting her program in her lap. Dad sat ramrod straight, jaw clenched, as if daring the world to judge him. Dylan was already on his feet, eyes locked on me, his posture tense and coiled, almost predatory. My stomach twisted. He looked the way he did before every family blow-up, every time things went sideways at home. The dean shook my hand and handed me the diploma folder. I tried to keep my eyes front, keep my smile steady. But in the next heartbeat, everything unraveled. Dylan was moving, fast. He pushed past the woman sitting next to him, barely hesitated as an usher reached for his arm and missed. No one in the crowd seemed to realize what was about to happen. I did. I'd known him too long not to. He stormed up the steps, cutting through the ceremony as if it meant nothing. For a second, I froze. Some primal part of me expected him to just shout, to make a scene. Instead, he stopped right in front of me, blocking out the spotlights, his expression dark and unreadable. Then his fist came flying. There was no time to react. I barely registered the movement, just the impact, sharp, brutal, a detonation against my cheekbone that snapped my head to the side. Pain shot through me, blinding and instant. I tasted blood, felt the world tilt, and heard a collective gasp surge through the arena. My cap spun off my head, the folder jabbed into my ribs, and I hit the polished wood of the stage. The noise that followed was unreal. Screaming, shouts, a woman's voice nearby shrieking my name. Cameras flashed everywhere, recording, documenting, immortalizing the humiliation. I blinked through tears, struggling to get my bearings, trying not to look as broken as I felt. For a heartbeat, I saw a shadow loom over me. My father. For one wild, desperate second, I believed he was coming to help, maybe to defend me. He knelt down, his face close, voice low so only I could hear. "You deserved it," he said. 3 words, calm as a judge, cold as steel. It hit me harder than the punch. I stared up at him, searching for something, anything, human in his eyes, but there was only satisfaction. Only approval for my brother's violence. Around us, the ceremony collapsed into chaos. Security guards rushed the stage, trying to wrestle Dylan away. The band faltered, music dying mid-note. People in the audience shouted, some furious, some just thrilled to have a story to tell. Through it all, I forced myself to sit up, refusing to give either of them the satisfaction of seeing me stay down. My cheek throbbed with each heartbeat. I told the dean, who was kneeling beside me, that I was fine, even though my voice cracked and my hands were shaking. Above us, 100 cell phones gleamed, evidence being created frame by frame. Photos, videos, proof. That's when I realized the story was changing. Their abuse, their humiliation. Finally, it wasn't just mine to bear in silence. The world was watching now. And this time, I wasn't going to let them write the ending. As the paramedics dabbed at my bleeding lip backstage, I kept replaying everything. The punch, the chaos, Dad's voice in my ear. The truth was, I'd been hit by my brother before. Just never in front of thousands, never with so many witnesses and cell phones catching every second. I knew what would come next, because I'd lived this routine since I was a child. Dylan's temper had always ruled our house. When I was 10, he pushed me off my bike, and I limped home with blood streaming down my leg. Dad told me not to make a big deal out of nothing. At 14, Dylan slammed my bedroom door off its hinges because I wouldn't let him copy my history homework. Dad's advice? Boys lose their tempers, Caitlin. You need to stay out of his way. And Mom, well, she always said the same thing, her voice tight and tired. Let's just keep the peace. Keeping the peace meant letting Dylan win, every time. By high school, I understood exactly where I fit in. When I earned a full ride to West Point, Dad's first reaction wasn't pride. It was a casual, how are you going to help your brother get his life together? When Dylan flunked out of community college, Dad said the professors just didn't appreciate his unique personality. I started working at a coffee shop on the weekends during college, just to pay my bills. Dad never sent a dime. Mom, on the rare occasion I visited home, would slip me a crumpled $20 bill and an apology in her eyes. Dylan stopped by my tiny apartment twice in 4 years, both times after fighting with a girlfriend and needing a free couch. He left beer cans in the sink and a dent in my coffee table. If I complained, he called me uptight. Dad called me ungrateful. Still, I kept moving forward, semester after semester, honors, military training, double shifts at the base commissary, all to build a life that didn't revolve around their moods. But home had a way of pulling me back in, always on their terms. Every call from home carried a price. Could I send money for Dylan's car payment? Could I help with Dad's unexpected medical bills? Could I spare something to help Mom fix the washing machine? Sometimes I said yes, out of guilt. Sometimes I ignored the calls and stewed in guilt anyway. That spring, as I prepared to graduate, I mailed invitations to a few close friends and distant relatives. I didn't invite my parents, not by accident, but because I couldn't stand the thought of them turning my day into their stage. But 2 weeks before graduation, my phone rang, Mom's number flashing. Her voice was watery, trembling at the edges, the way it always got after she'd been crying. "We want to be there for your big day," she said, voice quivering. "Dylan wants to see you walk across that stage." My gut twisted. Dylan at my graduation was the last thing I wanted. But some tiny, battered part of me still wished they could just behave for one day. I told her I'd leave tickets for them at will call. She sounded relieved. I could hear Dad in the background, low and satisfied, as if he'd just scored a point. The morning of graduation, I kept repeating to myself, this time will be different. They'll sit quietly. They'll clap. When it's over, we'll take a photo and go our separate ways. Alyssa, my roommate since our second year, was the only person who seemed to believe I could have a peaceful day. She took a dozen photos of me before we even left the apartment, making me laugh, handing me coffee. Outside, the city buzzed, students in uniforms, families streaming toward the arena, the air sweet with cut grass and adrenaline. I let myself imagine, for just a minute, that I'd earned a day without drama. But Dylan had always had a gift for sniffing out the softest moments and breaking them wide open. The last time I'd seen him before graduation was Thanksgiving, when he'd cornered me in the kitchen, demanding $500 to fix his truck. When I told him I couldn't help, he called me selfish and shoved me hard enough to bruise my shoulder. Dad told me later I should have helped, because that's what family does. Mom just put the pie on the table and asked us both to sit down, like nothing had happened. These memories were bruises I pressed, over and over, to see if they still hurt. They always did. Standing in the tunnel, waiting for my turn to step onto that stage, I let myself hope, just for a moment, that things could be different. That was the last time I'd ever make that mistake. The signs had been there all along, if I'd just let myself see them clearly. Dad's grip on the family wasn't just emotional. It was practical, financial, total. He managed the bank accounts, decided which cars we could use, opened all the mail before it ever reached us. He told Mom when she could visit her sister and told me which clothes were appropriate if for class or work. Whenever I pushed back, I got the same thing, a lecture on respect and gratitude, followed by the silent treatment that made the whole house hum with tension. But Dylan played by a different set of rules. He could disappear for days and return smelling like a dive bar, and Dad would just clap him on the shoulder and laugh. When Dylan lost his job at the garage for missing shifts, they blamed the manager for not understanding his talents. Growing up, I learned that talking about my successes was risky. When I won the county debate championship, Dad shook my hand but spent the evening telling everyone how Dylan once talked his way out of a speeding ticket. When I got into West Point, Mom whispered a congratulations, but it just said, don't forget where you came from. Dylan's attitude toward me hardened over the years. At first, it was just teasing, calling me either little professor or a soldier girlie with a sneer. As we grew older, it became more openly hostile. He'd mock my uniform, say I was trying to act like a man, remind me that no matter how many medals I won, he'd always be stronger. Once, on a rare visit home, I caught him rifling through my backpack in the living room. He claimed he was looking for gum, but my wallet had been right on top. $60 vanished that day. I never confronted him. It felt easier to let things slide than to start a fight I could never win. My last year at West Point, the requests for money ramped up. Dad said the roof was leaking and needed repairs. Mom needed new glasses. Dylan needed a helpie with court fees after another bar fight. Sometimes I sent what I could. Sometimes I didn't. Every time I ignored a call, Dad's voicemails grew colder. That March, Dylan called, asking for $1,000 for his car after a fender bender. "I'm saving for my move after graduation," I told him. His reply was flat, "You'll regret this." I thought it was just bluster. 2 weeks later, Mum called to say they wanted to come to my graduation. She framed it as wanting to see me shine, but I could hear Dad prompting her in the background. Against every instinct I'd built over 23 years, I said yes. In the days leading up to the ceremony, I was busy packing up my apartment, finishing finals, and trying not to picture them in the crowd. My friends were excited for me, planning a dinner after the ceremony. Alyssa teased that she wanted to see Dad's face when I walked across the stage with honors cords. I laughed, but inside I worried about what Dylan would do. Graduation morning dawned bright and breezy. The campus sparkled, black uniforms marching in rows toward the arena, laughter floating through the air. I met my friends outside the entrance, forced myself to be present in the moment. For a second, I actually felt happy, safe. The procession into the arena was a blur, banners hanging from the rafters, the band pounding out a march, hundreds of faces turning as names were read. I found my parents and Dylan 10 rows up, their expressions impossible to read at a distance. Dad sat stiff as a board, Mom twisted her program, Dylan slouched in his seat, eyes already hunting for me. When my row was called, I tried to steady my breathing. Up the steps. Across the stage. Shake the dean's hand. Down the other side. Keep your head up. Smile for the camera. Nothing bad will happen. But with every step, the knot in my stomach tightened. I could feel the tension even before anything happened. Dylan's eyes followed me, tracking my every move. Then, he stood. He rose in one fluid motion, a smile stretched across his face, but his eyes were cold. He moved into the aisle, swaggering like he owned the whole damn place. My father didn't stop him. The ushers hesitated, unsure what to do. I kept walking, focused on the dean, thinking, if I just keep moving, he can't ruin this for me. The dean smiled and handed me the diploma folder. I barely had time to grip it before Dylan reached me. No hesitation. His fist flashed up, knuckles catching the stage lights. The sound echoed through the arena, a sickening crack. My head snapped sideways, white light burst in my vision, and the crowd gasped in one horrified intake of breath. I fell, landing hard on my hands and knees, the taste of blood bright and metallic in my mouth. My cap tumbled across the polished floor, the folder pressed into my ribs. All around, the world erupted, security shouting, the band silenced, strangers calling for help. Through the blare I saw Dad. He stepped forward, squatted beside me, and said those words again, barely above a whisper. "You deserved it." I met his gaze, searching for any hint of regret. There was none, just cold satisfaction. I sat up slowly on the polished stage floor, my cheek throbbing in time with my heartbeat, but I refused to let them see me fall apart. A professor crouched beside me, pressing a white handkerchief to my lip. "You need to sit still, Caitlin," as she whispered, voice gentle but urgent. The noise in the arena grew, a restless, buzzing storm, shouts, cell phones lifted high, flashes lighting up the chaos. In the front row, someone hissed, "Record all of this." Security tried to pull Dylan back, but he just wiped his knuckles on his pants, chest out, radiating bravado. My father met the eyes of the guards as if daring them to act. For a split second, I wondered if they would actually try to defend me. But instead, they seemed unsure, more afraid of escalating things in front of so many witnesses. The band tried to resume playing, but the music shook and faltered. People were yelling, some furious, others too stunned to react. I heard Alyssa's voice, thin with panic, calling my name from the aisle. The world spun, but I steadied myself on the stage, refusing to give Dylan the satisfaction of seeing me stay down. "I'm fine," I muttered to the professor, though my voice was shaky and the word broke in my mouth. Evidence was everywhere, hundreds of phones, all pointed at me, catching every second in high-definition clarity. I looked up and saw it spreading already, like wildfire. Photos, videos, whispered commentary. The story of my family, the story I'd carried in silence for so many years, was suddenly not mine alone. And in that strange, bruised moment, a hard, new resolve settled in my chest. The punch was pain. The words were a sentence. But the photos, the videos, they were my weapon now. For the first time in my life, there was proof. The rest of the ceremony limped forward, awkward and heavy. A nurse led me to a small medical room at the side of the arena, where she cleaned my cut and asked if I wanted to go to the hospital. I said no, though my jaw ached and my face was already swelling. I wasn't going to let them take me out the back like a criminal. I wanted people to see me walk out on my own terms. As I sat on the exam table, the whole scene replayed in my mind. Dylan standing, the fist, the flash of the camera, Dad's voice, "You deserved it." I clenched my fists until my knuckles ached. This wasn't the first time they'd hurt me. It was just the first time they'd done it in public, where everyone could see. That mattered. The years of insults, shoves, demands, there'd never been proof before. But now, the evidence was in 100 pockets and would be online before the sun set. For the first time since the hit, I breathed deeply. It wasn't relief. It was something cleaner, certainty. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I left the nurse's station with my head held high, ignoring the throbbing ache in my face. Alyssa was waiting outside, her phone clutched so tightly her knuckles were white, her face pale with fury. "I've got the whole thing, Kate. Start to finish," as she said. "Half the seniors have already sent me their own videos." My phone buzzed over and over. Messages, notifications, tags. People I barely knew were sending sympathy, asking if I was going to press charges, offering support. I didn't answer. I was thinking too clearly for the first time in years. This was my turning point. Every bruise, every unreturned favor, every time I'd swallowed my pride for the sake of keeping peace, it all led to this. There was no peace left to keep. I could feel a new kind of weight in me, but it wasn't fear. It was decision. They tried to break me in front of a crowd, to humiliate me so publicly that I'd never recover. But I wouldn't let this become another family secret. Not this time. I re-entered the arena as the ceremony wound down, the air thick with what had happened. Graduates hugged, took photos, celebrated, but everywhere I walked, people's eyes flicked to my swollen cheek. Some offered quiet words. Some looked away, unsure. My phone never stopped vibrating. The footage was already moving through the campus like a spark in dry grass. Outside, in the bright May sun, I spotted my family by the parking lot. Dad, arms folded, glare unwavering. Dylan leaning against the car, still smirking. Mom, clutching her purse, eyes darting between us, silent and frail. I didn't go to them. I turned instead to a group of friends who surrounded me with hugs and cameras, taking pictures of my bruised face and the cords on my uniform. I smiled for those photos, because I wanted that, too, to be part of the record. As soon as I could, I slipped away to my apartment. Alyssa came with me, locking the door and setting her phone on the counter. We watched the videos together, different angles, crystal clear audio, every brutal second immortalized. We saved them all, backed them up to the cloud, and I started messaging friends in the journalism program. I sent them everything. The truth, I wrote, with my name attached. Don't let anyone twist this into something else. That night, I sat at my desk with the blinds drawn, videos playing on a loop. Each replay sharpened the truth, Dylan's deliberate approach, the panic in the crowd, Dad's voice, cruel, unmistakable, court clear as a bell on Alyssa's phone. Another angle from a friend up in the balcony captured the audience's reaction. Hundreds of heads turning, hands flying to faces, phones rising all at once. One of the clearest clips came from a stranger, and you could hear the audience gasp as Dad delivered his verdict. I labeled and saved every file, backed them up to 3 different places. By midnight, I typed out a clear, factual account of everything that happened. No drama, just the facts, times, details, sequence. I added context, because the punch wasn't some isolated outburst. It was years in the making. I wrote about the Thanksgiving fight, the money demands, the little ways my family had excused Dylan and minimized me, and how every achievement I'd earned was met with either silence or suspicion. At 2 a.m., I hit send, delivering the story and all the evidence to 3 friends in journalism and 1 trusted alum who worked for a regional news site. My instructions were simple: share the truth. Let the world see. I didn't want a viral. I wanted the undeniable. I woke up to my phone buzzing before sunrise. Dozens of messages, most from numbers I didn't recognize. There were links to social media posts, the videos already reshared thousands of times, hashtags trending across campus. Comments from strangers, some outraged, some supportive, some shocked that a family could fall apart so publicly. Several local blogs had already picked up the story, framing it as a case of a graduation violence court on camera. My inbox held interview requests. For now, I ignored them. Around 10, my mother called. Her voice was tight, formal, trying not to sound desperate. "Caitlin, people are talking. Your father says you need to take those videos down. We're embarrassed. You're making this a spectacle." I took a long breath. "Mom, Dylan made it public when he punched me in front of everyone. I'm not hiding it." She was quiet. For once, she had nothing left to say. By noon, Alyssa and I had organized every file, photos, clips, supportive messages, into a folder. I was ready for whatever would come next, even if I had no idea what that was. But as the day wore on, I realized I couldn't just let the court of public opinion decide. I needed to make this official. I called the NYPD, explained the situation, and asked about filing an assault report. "Come in with your evidence," the officer said. I dressed in my neatest civilian clothes, printed my written account, and loaded the videos onto a flash drive. At the station, the officer on duty watched every video twice, face tightening with each replay. "This is clear assault, Ms. Morgan. We'll be contacting your brother and your father. I left the station with a case number and a calm I hadn't felt in years. On the walk home, I called a lawyer a friend had recommended. We spoke about restraining orders, legal rights, how to keep my family from coming near me. Every step felt measured, deliberate, but not angry. Not anymore. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wanted boundaries. That night, I logged into my bank and stopped the automatic transfers I'd been making every month for Dad's bills. For the first time in years, I closed the door that had always been open to their demands. The calls kept coming. Mom, Dad, even Dylan once, leaving a rambling, half apologetic, half accusing voicemail. I let them go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to hear their voices, and maybe I never would be. This wasn't about shutting them out in anger. It was about building a line that they could never cross again. By the following afternoon, the story had exploded beyond the campus. News sites in the city were reporting it. Twitter threads dissected every second of the footage. The comments were relentless, almost universally on my side. Strangers sharing their own stories, people calling for accountability, and even a few high-profile advocates for family abuse survivors offering support. The NYPD called to say they'd questioned Dylan and Dad. My lawyer called, too, advising me to brace for backlash. Once the legal consequences sink in, your family will try to contact you. Don't engage. She was right. At 5 p.m., a loud knock rattled my apartment door. I looked through the peephole. Dad, Mom, Dylan. They stood close, a united front. My heart raced, but I didn't flinch. I opened the door just enough to speak. If you want to talk, it's going to be in my living room, on my terms. They shuffled in, eyes darting around as if searching for allies. On the dining table, I'd laid out printed screenshots, the punch, Dad's words, the police report, and a summary of all the money I'd sent over the years. Dylan spoke first, defensive. You're blowing this out of proportion. This is family. I cut him off. No, this is the truth. Years of abuse, all shown to the world in one public moment. Dad tried to play authority. Drop the charges, Caitlin. Family doesn't take family to court. I met his eyes, steady. Family doesn't assault each other in public and call it deserved. Mom murmured about putting it behind us if I just took down the videos. I pointed at the photos. The only way forward is accountability. Dylan looked like he wanted to explode. Dad's face went cold. I explained my new boundaries. No more money, no communication except through lawyers. And the charges would stand. Dad stood so fast his chair scraped. You're no longer welcome in my house. I nodded. That's fine. I've already built a life without your help, and I'm going to keep doing that. They left, one by one, anger and disbelief on their faces. I locked the door behind them, pressing my back to the wood, and breathed out. It was finally quiet. Not the tense, brittle quiet of my childhood home, but real, peaceful silence. I picked up the evidence and filed it away. I'd shown them, and myself, that their control over me was broken for good. 2 days later, I got a call from the detective handling my case. His voice was calm, professional, but I could hear the undertone. After reviewing the footage and your statement, the district attorney has decided to press charges. Your brother will face assault, and your father will be charged with aiding and abetting. It's likely you'll be asked to testify in court, but the evidence is very strong. For a long moment, I sat on the edge of my bed, the phone pressed to my ear, stunned. I'd imagined justice my whole life, but never thought it would come like this, so clinical, so official. I thanked the detective, then called my lawyer, who walked me through what to expect: court dates, possible media attention, the slow, grinding process of the legal system. Later that day, my lawyer forwarded a message from Dylan's attorney, offering a settlement, a lukewarm apology and a promise he'd stay away if I dropped the charges. I didn't even hesitate. This wasn't about a truce. I wanted real consequences, something that would follow them the way their words and blows had followed me. Word of the case traveled fast. My story kept spreading. Local news picked it up, then regional. A well-known advocate for victims of family violence shared it online, offering resources and legal contacts if I needed them. I wasn't ready for interviews, but I sent statements to reporters, emphasizing that abuse didn't stop being abuse just because it was family. My phone finally quieted. No more calls from my parents, none from Dylan. I suspected their lawyers had told them to back off, and that was fine by me. I poured my energy into work at the base, into my friends, into building a life where every new step felt like mine alone. A listener, ever loyal, filtered my messages and social feeds so I could focus on what mattered. When the first court date came, I wore my navy suit, hair pulled back, files in hand. I walked through the courthouse doors with my lawyer, feeling the steady thump of adrenaline. Dylan was there already, eyes down, his lawyer whispering to him. Dad sat stiff in his chair, jaw locked, refusing to look my way. The judge reviewed the evidence, set the schedule for trial, and made it clear the charges would be taken seriously. Reporters waited outside, cameras ready. I didn't stop to speak, but I caught the ripple in their eyes: sympathy, surprise, the sense that maybe this story was bigger than just my family. That night, I got an email from a woman I didn't know. "I saw your story. I finally told my own family what my brother did to me. I thought I was alone. Thank you." I read her words twice, and something in my chest cracked open. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was the ripple I'd hoped for, the possibility that my refusal to stay silent might help someone else find their voice. The legal process was slow. Each new hearing felt like another stone laid down on a path away from the past. Some nights I'd replay old memories, testing the bruises, my father's lectures, Dylan's taunts, the years I'd spent trying to please people who would never be satisfied. But each step forward built something solid under my feet. Months passed, and at last, the trial began. The courtroom was hushed, all fluorescent light and hard edges. I took the witness stand in my uniform, back straight, voice steady, and told the story: the graduation day punch, the flashes from 100 cameras, Dad's words ringing in my ears. I explained, detail by detail, how that one public act was the culmination of years of smaller, hidden cruelties. My lawyer displayed photos for the jury: my swollen cheek, the blood on my uniform, the stunned faces in the crowd. The jury listened, some members shifting uncomfortably, some with tears in their eyes. Dylan's attorney tried to suggest I was exaggerating. Maybe it was just family tension, just a bad moment. But my answers were measured, precise, every word backed by video, timestamps, medical reports, and the testimony of friends who'd never doubted me. When my father took the stand, his tone was defensive, almost mocking. But under cross-examination, he stumbled, unable to explain why he'd stood by, why he'd said what he said. The prosecutor played the audio from Alyssa's phone. his voice so clear and cold. The impact on the jury was immediate. Witnesses from the ceremony, friends, professors, even strangers who'd been in the audience, described the attack, the chaos, and the reactions of my family. Each account echoed the truth I'd carried for so long. Finally, the verdict came. Dylan was found guilty of assault, sentenced to community service, court-ordered counselling, and a restraining order to keep him away from me. Dad was fined, ordered into anger management, and publicly admonished by the judge for enabling his son's violence. They weren't going to prison, but they weren't walking away clean, either. And for the first time, their guilt would follow them, not me. Outside the courthouse, reporters finally cornered me. I spoke carefully. I grew up believing loyalty to family meant keeping quiet. But silence only protects the ones who hurt you. The truth matters, even when it breaks the story everyone else wants to believe. The coverage was intense. My story became part of a bigger conversation about family, about accountability, about breaking cycles of silence. And slowly, as the months went by, my world grew lighter. When the trial ended, there was no dramatic, Hollywood-style closure, no apologies, no tearful reconciliations. The news coverage faded, but the impact remained. My family's story was now public, and that in itself changed everything. In the weeks that followed, the ripple effects became obvious. Dylan's circle of friends thinned out quickly. Some couldn't look him in the eye. Others made excuses, but even his old high school buddies distanced themselves, not wanting to be part of a scandal replayed on every phone in town. Dad's reputation, so carefully constructed over decades in our little North Carolina community, began to shift. Where he was once greeted with respect and deference, there was now awareness, a quiet judgment that came with whispers in grocery store aisles, averted eyes at church. I didn't gloat, and I didn't shield them. Actions had consequences, and those consequences were finally theirs to carry. Invitations to family events stopped coming. If I ran into distant relatives, they'd cross the street rather than meet my gaze. For a while, the silence stung. I had spent years trying to win approval that would never come. Now, suddenly, there was space, an absence of forced smiles and anxious phone calls. My energy, once drained by old wounds, was free to flow into something new. I accepted new projects at my base, took on extra responsibilities, started showing up at the local veterans group. I even began volunteering at a shelter for women and families who had been through their own private wars. Every time I spoke with someone wrestling with fear or shame, I could see a flicker of hope when they realized I truly understood. That connection meant more than any headline, any viral video. One evening, just before the anniversary of graduation, I received a letter with no return address. The handwriting was familiar, my father's. I hesitated before opening it, expecting anger, accusations, maybe even threats. Instead, the note was brief. He still believed I'd betrayed the family by taking them to court, but for the first time, he admitted regret for not stopping Dylan on that stage. There was no apology, not really, but the certainty in his words had cracked. I tucked the letter into a drawer, not as a keepsake, but as a quiet reminder that speaking the truth can force even the most stubborn hearts to reconsider. That year, when graduation rolled around again, I didn't avoid the memories. I reached out to Alyssa and the friends who had rushed to my side, and we gathered for a simple dinner, pizza, laughter, a bottle of wine shared on my apartment balcony. We toasted to new beginnings, to standing up for ourselves, to building lives that honored who we truly were. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel pride, not for surviving, but for changing the story, for showing others that strength isn't about being silent or stoic, but about refusing to accept someone else's version of your life. There were still moments of grief for the family I'd wished for the ease and warmth that had always seemed just out of reach. Sometimes I'd walk through Central Park, watching fathers push strollers or daughters laugh at old jokes, and a small ache would stir in my chest. But the ache didn't swallow me anymore. I could look back at my childhood home, my father's lectures, even Dylan's smirk, and feel only a soft, distant sorrow, not a wound, but a scar. Meanwhile, new joys grew in their place. I made time for old hobbies, running, painting, reading the books I'd put off for years. I visited museums and learned to cook halfway decent lasagna. My apartment became my sanctuary, filled with sunlight and music and friends who came for comfort, not to judge or demand. One evening in the shelter, a young woman asked me how I'd learned to speak up. "Didn't you ever worry that telling the truth would make things worse?" I smiled, thinking of that stage, that moment, the blinding lights and my father's voice. "I used to," I admitted. But keeping secrets never kept me safe. Telling the truth let me finally breathe. As summer rolled in, I found myself invited to speak at a local college. They wanted someone who'd broken cycles of silence, someone who could talk about rebuilding a sense of self after family trauma. I almost said no, but Alyssa insisted, and so I stood in a sunlit auditorium, sharing not just my story but what had come after. The rebuilding, the hard-won peace, the possibility of new connections and new family, made by choice rather than blood. By then, I understood that the truest loyalty I could offer was to myself, to protect the woman I'd become, to honor the girl who had always deserved better. I learned that justice, when it finally arrives, isn't about vengeance, but about clearing space for hope. As summer deepened, the city was full of possibility. Sometimes I still caught myself looking over my shoulder, expecting a call or an ambush from the past. But each day those shadows grew thinner, replaced by the steady certainty that I was free. Free to serve, to love, to grow. Free to speak and to rest. Free to tell my story, truthfully, fearlessly, and on my own terms.